in the next couple of moments. So get comfortable and we'll see you in a bit. Okay. So a couple of people after joining in the webinar there, which is great to see. So let's get this show on the road. Thank you everyone for joining us today for Action Point's latest webinar. We're looking at particular aspects around desktop as a service, and ultimately we want to answer the question, how do you enable a seamless operation in your company? And the big focus is desktop as a service, and really the goal is to transform your IT department and deliver a better remote work experience. I am today's host. I'm marketing manager here at Action Point, and my name is Peter Hunt. I guess for people who may not have heard of us before, I'm just going to give a brief background on the company and give you some context coming into today's event. So our mission here at Action Point is to help companies achieve their greatest potential using the power of technology. And we do that by delivering ultimately 3 strands of services: consultancy and advice, managed IT services, and custom software development. Within our managed IT services arm, we have our cloud services arm. And I'll introduce my speaker, Finian Nally, in just a little bit. He actually leads that particular segment of the business. Within cloud services, we look at things like remote working, modern workplace, IT security, and today's topic, desktop as a service. So just to give us some background on today's speaker, Finian Nally has been working in the IT industry for well over 20 years. He leads the Microsoft practice here at Action Point. He's giving me a funny look there when I said 20 years. He leads the Microsoft practice here at Action Point, where he focuses on helping our customers make the most out of cloud platforms Azure and productivity platforms such as Office and Microsoft 365. In the past year, Action Point has started rolling out desktops as a service using Windows Virtual Desktop, and Finian has developed his expertise and experience in the area. So he's very well positioned to speak on today's topic. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, Finian.
That's great, Peter. Thanks very much. Almost 20 years. I'm not fully going for the 20 years mark just yet. Nearly there, though. Thanks very much, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon at this stage. Thanks for joining me today. As Peter said, we're going to discuss seamless operations in your organization today through the lens of Windows Virtual Desktop and Desktop as a Service. The agenda for today really is to cover 6 key areas. Enabling seamless operations in your company. What exactly does that mean? What are the common blockers in holding businesses like yours back? What happens when you ignore these blockers? And how can your business avoid this? And then we'll dive deeper into Microsoft Windows Virtual Desktop and how it actually aligns up with those seamless operations and addressing many of the issues. And we'll discuss some next steps at the very, very end. As Peter said, my name is Finian Nally. I'm head of Microsoft Cloud Solutions within Action Point, and really being head of cloud solutions, specifically Microsoft Cloud Solutions, my role lines up very closely with our mission to help companies achieve their greatest potential using the power of technologies. And some of the questions I'm going to answer today are around that seamless operations. How do you actually keep the lights on? How do you do that while keeping your data safe and secure at the same time? And in addition to that, making sure that your colleagues, your employees across the business are happy and get their productivity boosted. And with Windows Virtual Desktop, how do we enable that? I suppose to bridge into what Peter mentioned there a few minutes ago, just about Action Point, one thing to touch on specifically is our Azure team or our Microsoft Cloud team within the business. We bring, I suppose, a wealth of both breadth and depth of knowledge across the business with a high degree of certified engineers across everything from administration to security to DevOps, right through to a depth of the Microsoft platform, where we hold multiple gold and silver competencies across the breadth of the Microsoft stack. So it gives you the knowledge that you're in safe hands when we're having these early discussions around cloud technologies, but also when we're diving into projects and delivering management of those projects thereafter. So enabling seamless operations, what exactly does that mean? And for many people, it can mean many, many things. I suppose we've distilled it into 5 key areas that we like to focus on. The first is becoming proactive in dealing with ticketing issues. And I think the key word there is being proactive. In our conversations, we find that many teams or many IT teams are in a reactive mode. Everything is about wait for the problem to happen and let's react to it when it comes in. Whereby if we start adopting a modern IT approach and put on the front foot and go in an offensive fashion, we want to get into a position of being much more proactive in dealing with tickets and even eliminating them before they even happen. We want to do less manual and frustrating work. And again, this is something we see on a regular basis with IT teams, that a large proportion of the teams are doing mundane, manual, repetitive tasks again and again. And back to that point about a modern IT approach, they haven't embraced an automated approach and introduced automation into the business to eliminate those manual and frustrating tasks. Innovation and strategic projects are important to many businesses. And I suppose many IT leaders that we would speak to want to introduce innovation and want to introduce strategic projects. But that's maybe as far as the conversation goes. There's a desire there, but those first 2 points are holding things back. But there's also a fear element introduced in there, because how do we introduce new and innovative projects when we simply have no control over the operations or no control over the costs that might come up? In line with that, enabling seamless operations allows us to free up time to not only start, but more importantly, finish projects. I don't know how many times through the years I've had conversations with IT leaders where they've had so many projects on the go, started, some very recently and some over many, many years. But when we ask the question, how many projects have actually finished and how many projects have had finishing criteria, the answer is very, very few. And I think the important thing with many projects is, well, actually, how strategic are they to the business? Are they nice to have projects that the IT team has taken on themselves, or are they fundamentally strategic to the business? And wrapping all of that up is end users, the importance of our end users, the importance of their experience, but even the importance and making it simpler to onboard end users. And, end users can be new employees coming into the business, or they can be people moving between departments. How do we actually make it easier to onboard them into their various roles? So that's what enabling seamless operations means to us. And in our experience, companies that have had this seamless operations approach, especially with the advent of COVID or the advent of remote working over the last year, they've had a much different approach to their IT. They had good understanding of the costs of both working on-premise and working remote, and actually how that cost varies over time, and how that cost varies as to how people are in the office or out of the office. And for many, it's a case of, well, actually, the cost doesn't vary. Because we've introduced seamless operations across the business, we now know, regardless of where an employee is, that the cost is the same. And what that does is it brings in clarity. To enable a plan, a clear plan on investments. We can put in our strategic budgets on an annual basis. We know where the business is going. We know if the business is going to enlarge or maybe contract. And we're able to adapt our IT plan and our IT investments accordingly. Getting under the covers a bit and thinking about, what's holding people back. And we wanted to look at some stats out there as to what's actually going on, I suppose, specifically with the lens of Windows Virtual Desktop in mind. And one of those that jumped out at me was around, IT activities, specifically around applications. The level of involvement from IT teams around managing a simple thing like pushing out an application is huge. From initially pushing it out, to testing it, to managing the updates, to securing it, to making sure it's going to work on the various devices is huge, and it creates a huge IT overhead. And often 68% of IT budgets are just wrapped up in those existing projects on deploying an application. Whereas, the time and the effort and cost available for new initiatives and new IT projects is actually dramatically reduced. So when we look at Windows Virtual Desktop, what's interesting about that, and what's interesting about the amount of effort tied up in existing labor, is that with Windows Virtual Desktop, the cost actually reduces dramatically, up to 60% in some instances. So we're freeing up our IT resources. We're freeing up the cost within our IT team to actually make it available for those strategic projects. Looking further on from that, and more recently, Forrester published a report back in January of this year. So, with many of the statistics we see in the IT world, they're often very, very out of date, whereas this one here is right up to date. What's interesting about this is a few key things. So for companies who've introduced these seamless operations, who've adopted Windows Virtual Desktop, what they're seeing is 34% reduction in licensing costs. That's huge. That's a big chunk of cash that is now freed up and is available for that team to invest further in more strategic projects. They're also seeing that 59% or almost 60% cost saving in IT deployment and maintenance expenses. In other words, that overall labor cost that we have in our IT teams, that's a huge saving, massive in terms of the overall team. But fundamentally, the biggest one back to the business then is down to our end employees. 22 person hours per Windows Virtual Desktop per annum on average. That's a huge amount of saving back from a productivity point back to the business. And factoring that out over every single employee throughout our business is huge. So there's lots of benefits there. So what are common blockers that are holding Irish companies back? And I think it's not only Irish companies, it's every businesses. And there's 5 that we've surfaced. First is complexity, and fear I'd nearly put hand in hand. There is a desire for people to move to and adopt to new technologies like cloud, like Microsoft Azure, but knowing how to take advantage of them is making it too hard to visualize or to realize even. The fear of the complicated, we're just happy with things as they are. And that brings in on the good enough. And again, something we see on a consistent basis. While there is a desire and there's a want to a certain degree or certain parts of the business to move towards new solutions, the good enough approach, if it ain't broke, don't fix it type approach is evident in many, many businesses. And that's holding the company back in the long term. Likewise, daily needs are more than enough work. I mentioned earlier on about those seamless operations, being proactive or versus reactive on tickets, freeing up time and all those kind of things. If our teams are involved in just firefighting on a daily basis, if they're not actually looking at what the future is and implementing the future, where versus managing existing and complicated infrastructure, they're going to get stuck in the daily cycle, and they're going to get stuck in the cycle of just good enough. Security as well is a big thing that's holding people back. And often, I suppose, thinking to many of the conversations I've had over the last 12 months specifically, security can no longer be looked at through the lens of just good enough. It's a case of we have to adapt. There are so many new threats. There are so many new ways that our networks are being breached and that our data has been stolen. So we need to take a new approach to security. And we need to look at that through an innovative approach, to a more strategic approach. But if as a business we're being held back again by that just good enough approach, or that fear of complexity or fear of innovation, our security isn't going to evolve and we're leaving the business at risk. And lastly, one of the biggest ones we see kind of when we really get under the hood of things, it's people not being a fan of change management. While change is good for many people, the fear of change is huge across businesses. And that stems across entire businesses, not only within IT teams, but also at a leadership level and also at an employee level. And often those fears are well-founded based on previous projects, lack of communication, lack of insight, lack of real engagement with not only leadership in the business, but also end-to-end users and how they're actually going to receive and get benefits from new technology and new innovation. With that, I suppose I'd like to open up the poll. Tom, if you wouldn't mind opening up the poll there, and really from your own point of view, what are those challenges? What is preventing you from adopting cloud solutions or even desktop as a service solutions across your business? If you just want to click on the one that's you think is most appropriate to your business, I'll give it a couple of seconds there for people to put in their results. Great. Thanks very much for that. If you want to end the voting.
Coming online just to see if everybody saw the survey in screen.
Yeah, let me just re-ask, guys, if we get your feedback on the poll here. What is preventing you from adopting? Oh, we have a slight visual issue. Yeah. Can everyone see that poll okay? Can you just give us a thumbs up in the chat box, please? Yeah. So Paul, yeah, Vincent, lots of thumbs up here. So guys, yeah, if you could get your feedback on the question at hand, it'll be very helpful for our Q&A a little bit later. So what is preventing you from adopting cloud or solutions like desktop as a service? So just click on any one of the following answers. Change, not a fan of change management. Time, my daily activities are more than enough work. Security, not sure how to keep the business secure with new solutions. Complexity, don't know how to take advantage of new solutions. Good enough solutions are working right now. And the final option is already in the cloud. So I'll give you 10 or 15 seconds there just to
We'll have to talk about seamless operations in webinars as well.
Yeah.
Okay, if you want to end the poll, Peter, we might just move on.
Yeah, perfect. Let's move on. How about you, Finian?
Thanks, Peter. So what happens to companies that ignore these blockers? And I admit this is a sweeping generalization, but I suppose it's based on the conversations we're having. It's based on the trends we're seeing industry-wide kind of thing. Really, we start at the top of that funnel. Uncertainty, there is the desire there, but all those fears, all the uncertainty elements come in, and the fear of migration going wrong, the fear of leadership not supporting the opportunity. The element of uncertainty starts to creep in. From there, we move into ambiguity. How much are we going to spend? How much time will it take up? How much resources will it take up? So many unknowns there. So we're going to stop proceeding. Likewise with new technology, and something I keep referring to on a regular basis is the pace of technology. The pace of change in technology is something that we've never seen before. And that fear, again, is creeping into many, many organizations whereby it's perceived as a dark art or as a black box. We want to introduce this technology, but we simply have no idea how it works. So as a result of that, the path becomes more and more obscure. From there, we're back to our good enough, because of all of those things, the uncertainty, the ambiguity. Do you know what? What we have is just good enough. We're happy to manage the tangible solutions because our team is comfortable with that, and we're just going to stay with that. And really, to me, what's interesting about that particular point is it actually goes back to a book I'm reading now about mindset. We're in a very fixed mindset approach versus organizations that actually have a growth mindset. If we're staying in that fixed mindset approach, we're in our comfort zone. We're just going to stay exactly as we are, versus organizations who have that growth mindset. And really, then when we look at the last two steps of that funnel, innovation starts to slow down. We're being held back, and the business is missing opportunity. Our competitors are looking at advanced solutions. They're looking at innovating. They're looking at adopting cloud. They have that growth mindset within their business. Whereas us, if we're still maintaining that fixed mindset, we're going to miss opportunities. And the opportunities we're missing are not only net new opportunities for the business, but opportunities to provide a better customer experience and opportunities to provide a much, much better employee satisfaction. Give our employees the tools that are going to make them successful in their job. If we're not going to give them those tools, are they simply going to look elsewhere? So some of the areas that what can your business do to avoid this? Get rid of the uncertainty. We need to start moving along. We need to say, right, yes, there is uncertainty. Let's accept that there is uncertainty, but let's work with a partner to actually, make things a little more certain, understand what is actually there. Move to that modern IT approach I've mentioned a number of times now. Change the mindset to be proactive, to introduce automation, to be on top of things, to understand that technology is evolving rapidly. Create a vision of the benefits for the organization, right? We know that there's a lot of, in inverted commas, cool stuff out there kind of thing, but actually, how do we translate to what is cool versus what's of benefit to our business? Let's create a vision for the benefits to our business. And with that, align our cloud strategy with the business goals. Where does the business want to be in 6 months? Where is the business going in the next 3 years? What is our business strategy? And how do we as IT leaders align our cloud strategy to that business strategy? But fundamentally, start taking action today. This isn't something that is new. Cloud technology is no longer new. Desktop as a service is no longer new. It's actually the normal. It's the benchmark for many businesses. It's what they're doing right now. So you need to look at yourselves and say, right, how do we actually start our journey? How do we start to take the first step? And once we've taken the first step, what's the next step thereafter? Some of the rules of thumb, keep it real. With any technology project, are we actually addressing current challenges, but considering real future challenges? And I think the operative word there is real. Are these future challenges actually real challenges, or are they something that maybe we're just drinking the Kool-Aid and the industry has told us, yeah, you should be thinking about this stuff, but fundamentally maybe it's not relevant to our business? Know the fundamentals. Once we have a clear picture of what the solution is, be aware of what the possibilities are and of what the benefits are to adopting this modernization approach. Not just benefits from Well, it's going to make our IT platform simpler, but actually it's going to realize benefits for our customers. It's going to realize benefits for our leadership team. It's going to realize benefits for the organization as a whole. And in addition, with any project, make sure it has clear scope and delivers. You want to be able to measure and show the impact. If you're delivering a project, to understand, okay, well, what's the problem? What's the goal here? But bring it back to the business at the finish of that project and say, well, actually, here's what we set out to achieve, and here's what we did achieve at the end of that. So clarity, we bring in a lot of clarity back into the business, and it's something that's often missing. IT projects are delivered, and there is no clarity. There is no measurement as to what the end result was. And again, it brings in future ambiguity into future projects. So we want to get rid of that. So how can Action Point help? Really, there's lots and lots of ways we can help. Back to that point about our team and the depth and breadth of our knowledge, we're crystal clear on the complex. There's no doubt that this stuff is complicated, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a while. But because we have the experience, because we have the skills, we're used to dealing with that. We're used to taking away uncertainty. We understand the economics of cloud, all the different buzzwords and nuances that are in there. And we also understand the management of the cloud. It's not just a set it and forget it. There is lots of things that have to be considered, and it still is managing your operations in an ongoing way. But in addition to that, we make impact. We've worked with customers. We've done this time and time again. And I want to discuss one customer who we worked with over the last kind of 18 months or so. Customer in the financial services sector. Unfortunately, I can't share their name today. But at the moment, they have about 240 staff. And when they came to us initially, they had a vision where they wanted to expand into multiple new geographies. South Africa and mainland UK were their first two that they were going to expand into. So their workforce was rapidly evolving. But given the sector that they're in terms of financial services, they have a lot of applications, they deal with consumers, and they deal with a large volume of highly sensitive consumer data. So they wanted to make sure that that was centralized, that was always secure, that it would lined up with GDPR, given the fact that they're an EU-based company. But they were leveraging workforces in South Africa and mainland UK. So Windows Virtual Desktop allowed them to say, okay, we can give access to our employees in South Africa. We can give access to our teams in the mainland UK. But it allowed them to rapidly scale, to say, okay, every time they added 10 new employees in the UK operation specifically, they came to us and said, we've 10 new employees coming on board. What needs to happen? Minutes later, they were ready for those 10 new employees. This wasn't a large, complex project. Because we've set up the platform from the get-go, that on-demand scaling was readily available for them very, very easily. And what's also interesting, as COVID hit and they started having to change things, they were of the mindset that actually the only change is that the end user is going home. The end user is going to a different location. Our technology platform hasn't changed. Our fundamental cost base from a desktop as a service point of view hasn't changed. The user is still accessing things in the same way. So this gave them a seamless operation. What's interesting about this particular client is their IT team is actually made up of 2 people. So if we think about the complexity of introducing desktop as a service in a scenario with 240 people, the overhead almost becomes overwhelming when we think about that. However, if we're able to introduce desktop as a service to 240 individuals without any additional overhead to IT, we must be doing something right. And what that means is those 2 individuals are now fully focused on strategic projects. And this was a strategic project to the business. Now they can focus on the next strategic project. So lots of benefits, both for the end user, both for the IT team, but more importantly, for the business as a whole and their customers. So moving on, Windows Virtual Desktop addresses many of these challenges. So for those who don't know, Windows Virtual Desktop is your desktop, your applications, your data, all centrally managed in the cloud by Microsoft Azure. It means you can access your desktop from any device, from any location, all securely. So all packaged together, everything accessible, and giving you that same experience that you're used to while sitting at your laptop or your normal desktop. What's interesting about that, it allows me to structure the tools or the data or the information that I need to give to my various team members very, very easily. And it does that by decoupling things. So it's decoupled the operating system, it's decoupled the user profiles, and it's decoupled the applications. Why does it do that? To make things simpler, to actually make operations simpler. We're no longer worried about installing individual applications for individual users. We're now worried about, but we're now focused on user profiles. Who are our user profiles? What applications do they need? And you know what? We now have the confidence to give them the applications they need whenever they want it. So let's look at that in a little bit more detail. And I'm going to discuss 3 key areas around it: around best user experience, around enhanced security, and around simplified management. Because those 3 key areas bridge back up into our seamless operations. So first, around choice. End user choice is a big thing, and it's becoming a bigger thing in many, many organizations. As an end user, I want the choice to work on the device that is most suitable for my role wherever I am. So maybe I'm a field operative and I'm out on site and I like to use a tablet. But when I come back into the main HQ, I like to use my desktop because it's more powerful and I'm doing complex things. But when I go home, I want to use a laptop because it's nice and portable and it's smaller and I'm not doing complex things. What Windows Virtual Desktop gives me, it gives me that choice to work off any of those devices, but have the same experience throughout. Have that same experience of operating system, the same experience of apps that I use on a day-to-day basis, and nothing is changed. Everything is the same throughout. So I have that choice, which is good for our end users. From there, it's important that I'm getting that Windows experience. And while this is something that seems obvious and seems very simple, many people who've worked with virtual desktop solutions in the past know that, okay, the solution they're giving their end users is suboptimal. It's kind of like Windows, but it's not really. The apps kind of work okay, but they don't really. And maybe many of our integrations, be it Outlook integrations or other third-party integrations, simply don't work. We just have to accept that they don't work. With Windows Virtual Desktop, we don't have to accept any of those things. We know that it is Windows 10, that it's a Windows 10 experience, that all our integrations are going to work, and that if people are using multiple monitors like they would in the office, we want to be able to give them that multiple experience as well. In addition, adapting to our end users' needs and introducing new ways or new technologies to our end users to make their life easier. So something simple like Windows Hello for Business, whereby a user doesn't need to worry about passwords anymore. They can authenticate using biometrics. Well, Windows Virtual Desktop supports that natively. Likewise, it supports dynamic and adaptive bandwidth utilization, meaning if we're going from a scenario where users have been in the office with great high-speed dedicated broadband to a home office that is suboptimal. In the scenario I mentioned earlier on about our financial services client, they had to adapt to that in South Africa in a very big way, where in parts broadband isn't great, but they were able to leverage the power of that dynamically adapting bandwidth to be able to have the confidence to know actually for the majority of staff, they could still work away as normal. And I think with this, people expect that, right, regardless of which technology solution I'm using, I have a solution that is going to enable me to do my job. But I expect that I can use multiple monitors. I expect that I can use touch. I expect that I can use webcams and voice. And all of those things are natively built into Windows Virtual Desktop and out of the box. What's also interesting about this, again, for those who would have been used to using various VDI technologies in the past, is the complaint about slow login times was something that was ubiquitous. Pretty much every installation of VDI had some level of issue with, well, this morning it took me 5 or 10 minutes for my profile to load. This is a terrible experience. The way Windows Virtual Desktop structures the user profile and containerizes the user profile means those problems of the past are eliminated. We get extremely fast login times. We get predictable login times every time. And we're no longer worried about, well, user, you landed into a different server today, therefore you should expect a longer load up time. Those rules and limitations no longer apply. So again, we're giving a fast and a user experience that people expect. One last thing on the user experience, or a second last thing maybe on the user experience side, is something that often gets overlooked, is the simple things. Simple things like Outlook, OneDrive, desktop search, things that end users use on a day-to-day basis. And maybe when we start to configure VDI solutions, we often overlook them. And then we're giving a suboptimal experience to end users. Because of the way Windows Virtual Desktop is structured, all of those issues are addressed. So we're able to access our full Exchange environment, our full Outlook emails. We're able to use desktop search. We're able to use OneDrive for Business the same way we would on our device natively. So all of those little nuanced experience that an end user is used to are still delivered to them seamlessly. So again, we're matching the expectation. We're delivering a quality experience to the end user. And lastly, on the end user side is that experience around voice and video. Especially over the last 12 months or so, people are used to communicating via Teams. They're used to communicating effectively over voice and video. And with Windows Virtual Desktop, we're doing that effectively. So we're able to use the technology that's in there to actually offload that video. So it's one-to-one between the end user, or one-to-many, depending on the case. So again, we get that quality experience. It's not a lagging, frame rate lagging or voice lagging experience. It's actually a quality experience. And again, thinking of that financial service client I mentioned earlier on, their entire team work off voice, or a VoIP solution, pardon me. So they're leveraging voice technologies with their end customers on a day-to-day basis, all managed through Windows Virtual Desktop without any issue. So moving on from there, and to touch briefly on enhanced security, why this is important. It's important because of the world we live in now, the modern threats that are out there right now, and from a compliance and regulatory point of view, every business needs to have their finger on the pulse of security. But back to my other point about blockers, we don't want to make it complicated. We want to make it built in out of the ground up. And if we think about some of the on-prem virtualization and VDI type solutions that are out there, things that are common right now, so multi-factor authentication, conditional access, are modern security approaches. They're often not available with traditional VDI solutions, or if they are, they're actually highly complex to configure. With Windows Virtual Desktop, because it's built on the Azure platform, security is built in from the ground up. MFA is native to it. Conditional access is native to it. So I'm getting all those enhanced security features. And it allows me to eliminate many of the legacy security approaches that were there in the past. So by legacy security approaches, one of them is to look at our on-prem environment again, where in VDI world, we need to configure firewalls. We need to open ports. We need to configure gateway services. We need to do a lot of complex management, not only from an initial project point of view, but also from a day-to-day management point of view and monitoring point of view on inbound ports and inbound threats. A lot of that gets eliminated with Windows Virtual Desktop. Fundamentally, we don't open any inbound ports. Because we're using reverse proxy technology, it means ports are closed. So we don't need to worry about monitoring them in the first place. Because we're using tools like conditional access and MFA, we don't need to worry about VPNs. VPN technology is gone. And that allows us to leverage that approach to multiple device, multiple user. Fundamentally, we're focused on the user. The user's identity is the thing that we're focused on from a security point of view, because we've done the foundational elements ahead of that. Likewise with security, I suppose rights and rights access, who has access to what is very, very important. With on-premise solution, often the IT approach is, well, let's give our IT team full admin rights, or they know the global admin password, and that's their access. That's very, very risky. That's not really a modern approach and a modern IT approach to seamless operations. What Windows Virtual Desktop allows us to do is it allows us to be very, very granular on our control. Who's looking after our applications? Who's looking after the management? Who's looking after the day-to-day support? All of those roles can be granular using role-based access control and fundamentally using the principle of least privilege. So we're really going granular on our security, on our controls. And that's a new approach to many, many organizations. Lastly, on the security front, a really important one is that user sessions are isolated. So be it that I'm in single session mode or be it that I'm in multi-session mode, because our user sessions are containerized, it is completely isolated. So users are always isolated, their data is always secure, which gives peace of mind not only to the business, but also to the end user as well. The last area I want to touch on is around simplified management, because again, that feeds into our whole seamless operations approach and feeds into our whole modern IT approach. Again, with Windows Virtual Desktop, we're looking at a single platform. Be it we're delivering applications to an end user or a desktop to end user, it's the same experience, it's the same management plane versus a much, much more complex management plane of remote apps and remote desktops when we're on a traditional VDI environment. So ultimately, back to our 60% reduction in labor cost, we're lowering that, which gives great benefits back. Likewise, the level of tools, the number of tools available to us is dramatically simplified in Windows Virtual Desktop. Everything is packaged together. It's the same platform. It's the Azure platform. The tool set is there. So it greatly simplifies not only the learning curve, but it also gives us choice. It gives us a lot more choice as to how we're dealing, how we're deploying things, how we're configuring our DR, how we're managing our OS. It all becomes on the same platform and the same pane of glass. So again, simplification in our tool set. Investigating issues, a challenge for many, many organizations. And when we look at, again, looking at traditional on-prem solutions, It's a huge challenge. We're looking at everything from the virtual machine itself to the hypervisor to end user logs to third-party providers and everything in between, all different sources to kind of isolate a problem. With Windows Virtual Desktop, everything is simplified because we're looking at one solution, one integrated solution that's end-to-end. But we're also leveraging, again, back to the power of leveraging Azure again to say, actually, we can look at logs, we can go deep dive on things, but all in the one place and all through and all looking at it from a fast root cause identification. And because Windows Virtual Desktop has an open API, has REST APIs built in, it means that it is open. It means that we can leverage third-party integrations if we choose to do so. We can leverage third-party tools. Vendors can come and build third-party tools for us or for the wider ecosystem very, very easily, versus many, many traditional solutions that, vendors may be able to build management tools for parts of it, but not parts for others. Maybe we're dealing with one vendor for one part, another vendor for another part, and we're bringing in consultants and expertise from everywhere in between. So again, we're simplifying this. We're simplifying our engagement. We're simplifying the tool set, and we're standardizing our stack. And the last one then, just to get a little bit more technical and just to point out one of the big things, and again, this is through many, many years of dealing with VDI type technologies, is the management of images. Image management has always been one of the single biggest pain points for people. We start off with our standard image, maybe for sales, for HR, for engineering. But what happens if we've got a technical salesperson? Where do they sit? Are they in the image for sales or the image for engineering? Do you know what? Maybe we need to create a new image. And all of a sudden we're into image sprawl, image overload, and it becomes overtly complicated for anyone to manage and anyone to realistically manage on an ongoing basis. With Windows Virtual Desktop, we're leveraging that containerized approach. So not only are our user profiles containerized, like I said earlier on, but our applications are now containerized as well. So what that means is, well, I'm giving my applications to my end users when and where they need them. I don't have to worry about, are they a HR person? Are they a salesperson? Am I siloing people in individual role sets? I'm worried about what applications they need. And I'm giving those applications to them whenever and wherever they need it. So it makes it easy for me not only to deliver applications to the end user, but also very easy for me to manage. I'm managing one image, my Windows 10 image, and I'm managing my apps after that, like I always have. So to look at a summary, to try and sum a lot of this up, Windows Virtual Desktop helps address a number of specific business needs as well as seamless operations. It helps us address security and regulations, be it that we're in very, very regulated sectors, or even that we're in a normal business or an average business, whatever an average business is, but we still need to abide by regulations. It allows us to deal with elastic workforces, be it we're scaling up and scaling down, or having that consistent growth in our business. It allows us to deal with specific employees' needs, be it BYOD devices or select devices that people have. And it also allows us to deal with specialized workloads, be it I'm working on CAD or 3D rendering or high performance applications. I'm able to deliver those solutions when and where the users need them. So in summary, back to that seamless operations, I'm giving a great user experience, first and foremost. I'm giving time back to my end users. I'm enabling that seamless IT operations. I'm reducing the overhead that's actually within our IT team to actually concentrate on bigger projects like enhanced security, like building better security into our business. And I'm also making our costs scalable and predictable, which means I can start to forecast. I can start to realistically forecast into the business what budget I'm going to need from here on in. So to finish off, I suppose really a bonus, so to speak, for today's participants and kind of next steps. Two things I'd like to point out. One is around our data center solution assessment. So our normal approach is to, if you're interested in Windows Virtual Desktop, if you're interested in introducing some seamless operations into your organization, our data center solution assessment is often one of the first protocols to do a deep dive into what your IT platform looks like today and really get a sense of where that could go to in the future. Microsoft, in conjunction with ActionPoint, are also offering a 30% discount off Windows Virtual Desktop right now, up until the end of March, so not too much time left on that. But again, just to be aware that that is available. And I suppose with that, and trying to get you finished up a little bit early ahead of lunchtime today, we'd love your feedback. How did you find today's session? If you wouldn't mind bringing up the poll there, Tom, if you can populate that. But also, if you have any questions, pop them into the Q&A box there. Peter, if you wouldn't mind moderating the Q&A. Any questions about Windows Virtual Desktop, any questions about our experience with seamless operations and how we've introduced that, I'd be more than happy to talk on that for a few minutes.
No problem, guys. So if you want to answer the survey on screen, it'll save you doing it afterwards. So you could just click on each of the items there. It's all anonymous, so no worries. So I'll give you a couple of seconds there. And I suppose while people are answering the survey, Finian, fantastic presentation. It's certainly interesting to see some of the new developments and some of the new thinking around Windows Virtual Desktop. I suppose we've been I suppose communicating to the marketplace for well over a year now. I guess you know, Windows Virtual Desktop went through kind of a major update last year, and I guess there would have been some. You know, there would have been a lot of people who would have been a huge fan of the Windows Virtual Desktop environment, but what are we seeing in the marketplace now? So from the few deployments we've done in the past 12 months, like what's the uptake, usership, what's the feedback been like?
Yeah, I think when we talk about desktop as a service solutions and I suppose Windows Virtual Desktop coming on board, I think what a lot of people have is a lot of legacy baggage. You know, people have been burnt in the past by old approaches or even current approaches that are in market right now. They've had bad experiences. You know, things haven't gone well from the point of view of the complexity of projects, from the cost of projects, and in terms of the ongoing management of projects. So what Windows Virtual Desktop, I suppose, has done is it's really shaken up the market. It's, I suppose, delivered a solution that is quite simple. It's, there is a lot of complexity under the hood, but I suppose fundamentally it is a lot simpler than what's out in market already, kind of thing. But also it's delivered a solution that it's clear that Microsoft are investing in and continue to invest in. And the fact that it's built on the Azure platform, which is everything Microsoft do right now, means it's something that is going to be here for the long term. It's not something that is going to be short term and might get killed off in the near future. It's something that more and more businesses are adopting to. And again, in the era of remote working that we're in now, I think everyone has realized that this isn't a short-term thing. Remote working in some shape or form, and some guys will always be part and parcel of what we do. So businesses need to understand that and realize that actually we need to start evolving our IT platform to enable that remote working, however that looks like or whatever that looks like in the future. And for many, many businesses, Windows Virtual Desktop is the way to do that. Because back to that point at the very start, we want seamless operations. I don't want to have to go down a path of continuously investing huge sums of money in on-prem complex VDI solutions. I want a solution that's in the cloud that, you know, allows me to focus more strategically on things. And Windows Virtual Desktop is that platform.
Yeah, you've answered a question here from Kevin, and it was around how does he make how does he make the claim to senior management to invest in a desktop as a service solution when so many people will be heading back to the office. But I think you've touched on a couple of the key points. But is there anything else in that? I mean, are we seeing that? Are people a little bit uncertain with what's up ahead?
Yeah, I think the argument about back to the office, you know, we want to try and simplify that. Fundamentally, we want people to work. Where they are is kind of irrelevant. Yes, they do lots of other things when they're together in the office. And yes, they can be more productive and collaborative in terms of the water cooler moments and together meetings, face-to-face meetings, all of those kind of things. But from an IT point of view, how do we justify it back to the business? Well, I want to give my employees the same experience wherever they are. And for most businesses, vast majority of businesses, I would argue, you're not going to have a scenario where you can say to every single member of staff, next September, you're back in the office 5 days a week, 9 to 5, full stop, that is it. Very few businesses are going to be able to say that, because a large proportion of their staff will go, well, hang on a second, I really enjoyed my work-life balance. I enjoyed bringing my kids to school. You know, I enjoyed only working 3 days a week or whatever the case in between is. So, you know, the modern thinking and I suppose the modern expectation employees have is that I'm going to be flexible, or my employer is going to be flexible in my work practices. So to bring it back to the leadership and say, well, actually, number one, we need a platform that enables that. We want to enable that. Number two, the business, like any business, is constantly has a lens on cost. Operating costs in a business is huge in this day and age for many businesses, for most businesses. And IT always has a lens on that. IT are always asking for more, but the business regularly refuses to give IT more. So how can we say to the business, well, actually, do you know what? Over the medium to long term, we're going to actually save costs. We're going to change our cost structure. We're going to change our cost model. And maybe even set the vision out for the customer. Well, actually, with cloud and with whole cloud economics, we want to start doing a chargeback model. We want to introduce a platform where the cost of IT is actually borne by the department. that's the end goal, where we say, well, actually, do you know what? We can justify that spend because that department there are actually out making money. We're helping that department make more money. We're helping them do their job better. So look, I think that there's lots of ways to articulate it. I suppose the message I'd have to the person who asked that question is work with ourselves action point in, I suppose, outlining the business case. It's not just the case going, well, we have this new technologies. We know in our heart of hearts it's the right thing to do. Unfortunately, that doesn't hold a whole lot of weight when we look at it from a business point of view. We need to be very, very strategic and plan actually what is the benefit to the business in adopting this. So more than happy to talk about that offline.
A detailed answer, Finian, and thanks, Kevin, for the question. And as I said, the follow-ups and contact details are there. I have a question here from Paul. We currently use Office 365, Windows 10 with Sofas deployed. Why should we consider moving to WVD?
So again, it's an it depends question. If you look at what you have right now, is it just good enough, or is it doing everything you want? Is it doing absolutely everything you need? Are you finding there's complexity around application delivery? Are you finding there's complexity around securing your data? So it's not a simple, well, yes, you should absolutely move to virtual desktop right now. I suppose it's to be aware that it is there, that it has many, many benefits. But fundamentally, we need to look at how your business works, what you're doing, and see actually what the benefits could be. For some businesses, actually, there's no need to go to Windows Virtual Desktop because simply they have no back-end infrastructure. They've no application infrastructure that they need to worry about. So they're fine with a fully unified endpoint management approach to their deployment of desktops. So I think it's one to dive deeper, maybe offline. But it's an it depends answer, unfortunately.
Yeah, I definitely encourage anyone to get in touch after this. There is that 30% off offer until the end of the month. Let's explore it. I think it can't hurt to have a conversation. I think I have one more question in here, Finian, and we might have time for one more after this, but we're going to finish up pretty soon. Question from Burak. In our projects, we store very sensitive data of our customers. We need to comfort the customer that their data is still safe if we move to WVD. What kind of support do you provide for that? Can we choose the servers based on country? There's a bit of detail on that one.
Yeah, 100%. So again, I suppose Windows Virtual Desktop built on the Microsoft Azure stack. So it means that your data, or you can choose where your data is in one of 62 regions globally. So there's a lot of granularity there. We can say, okay, well, here's exactly where we want our data. We want it in North Europe, which is Dublin, or we want it in France, or we want it in South Central America, wherever is appropriate. We can put our data, we can spin up infrastructure and servers there. Likewise, we can put the security and controls about who has access to that data and from what device they have access to. So I mentioned earlier on about conditional access. We're controlling our data centrally, where we're putting it in the region it's supposed to be. And in addition, then we're controlling who has access to that data, how and when they have access to that data. So again, it's something we're more than happy to speak on offline, but in terms of the granularity of your question, yes is the simple answer to all of the above. All of that is controlled.
Excellent. Thanks for summarizing that so well, Finian. Okay, so the questions are, I think people are waking up. There are loads of questions. Question here from Tom, or from Greg, sorry, is I don't know if it's a question or a statement, but
yeah, I can see it there, Peter. So it's understanding the licensing aspect. So I think there's a number of fronts to this, and I kind of maybe skipped over it earlier on in terms of the licensing piece. Again, with your traditional environment, your licensing cost, I think I mentioned there's a 35% reduction in cost. So where does that come from, kind of thing? So if you think about your on-prem VDI type solution, often you're buying Exchange CALs, Windows CALs, RDS CALs, maybe some other vendor-related CALs, be it Citrix or VMware or something like that on top of that, and licensing on top of that. So there's a lot of complexity in that and a lot of cost in that. When we look at Windows Virtual Desktop, actually the license becomes very simple. So once you have a Microsoft 365 license, and there's a number of types. So for example, Microsoft 365 Business Premium, Microsoft 365 E3 or E5. Once you have one of those licenses, you automatically get rights to Windows Virtual Desktop. There are other nuances within there insofar as if you're coming with Windows 10 E3 licensing, it also gives you rights into Windows Virtual Desktop. So the fundamental point, though, is that to get access or to license Windows Virtual Desktop, I need one license for my user. That's the licensing aspect. After that, it becomes consumption as to what resources you're using underneath. In other words, what servers you're using, what networking you're using, etc. So it simplifies things greatly, but it also reduces the costs in a lot of ways as well.
Thanks very much, Finian. That's a very thorough answer. With that, if there isn't any more questions, I am going to wrap up today's webinar. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. And it's always great to see people showing a keen interest in this, and I suppose we're always optimistic about the future when we see the turnouts for these webinar. Thank you to Finian for more fantastic content, and thanks to Tom and Jeff, who are operating in the background here, doing some of the operations on the webinar today. Following up from this, I will send you a recording and a copy of today's deck, so you can share that with your colleagues internally and begin to make the business case for a desktop as a service of your organization. The offers still stand, and I'll have more detail of those in the follow-up email as well. We really encourage everyone here to come back to us and start that conversation on Windows Virtual Desktop. For myself, thanks very much for everything, and we hope to see you at an event again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.